Welcome to all of you, to our distributors and to our guests. Welcome to this morning session of our products that we're going to share today. You've had a great month of chatting to your customers and guests about the NeoLife business opportunity. And today I'm going to talk a little bit more about the product that NeoLife have to offer and what actually dovetails perfectly with your business opportunity. So you'll see that my slide was there with using nutrition as our weapon of choice. And that is what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about nutrition more specifically. So welcome to everybody, and let's just share some slides and discuss some information. And I enjoy sharing this with you about the NeoLife products. Right, so that is what I've chosen. I've used this terminology before, but I think it really does address the way we actually feel about nutrition. And let's go through the different slides and talk about how we are going to use nutrition as our weapon of choice. So the people behind our product offering and a group of very eminent scientists, our scientific advisory board, many people who have been in the business a while. I've actually met many of them. And the reason why I show you this is because, in fact, they put their names and their faces behind the products. And many of you have actually met them. So I've had the pleasure of meeting many of them. And they are, as I say, the people who conceptualize our products. And they also network with another whole group of scientists around the world. We call it the Global Science Network. And we are constantly making contact with new scientists or people with an expertise in a particular field. And just recently, somebody who in fact was part of our Global Science Network has actually joined the company because she felt that this was very important. She enjoyed the products and she wanted to be part of the NeoLife family, as it were. And I want to just read to you something that attracted her. And these were her comments. She's taken in by the scientific advisory board because she says, they enlist the support of and opinions of other outside experts. And curiosity and thirst for knowledge is built into NeoLife's DNA, from what she can see. And of course, she's been someone who's been involved in the commercial side of nutrition. She's also been very much involved in product development. And so she's got insight into other companies. And her comment was, in a lot of companies, you might have one person creating the formulation, and they're not always even a scientist. She said, in our case, we have a team of scientists. So that is something that really attracted her. And it also just makes you and I stop and think about what it is we actually do have. So using nutrition as our weapon, we're wanting in NeoLife to provide solutions to global trends. Now, we very specifically say that we are looking at nutrition, and yet you look at a whole lot of disease conditions that I'm putting in front of you. But in fact, this just highlights the importance of nutrition in our health and well-being and the influence it has on combating these conditions, which are conditions, or if you like, diseases of lifestyle. These are not what we call communicable diseases. We don't give these conditions to one another. They are conditions that happen to us individually, and some of us are more genetically predisposed than others, but we can pretty much have an influence from a nutritional point of view and a lifestyle choice point of view on these diseases. But what I also wanted to show you by illustrating it in this way is that they're all interlinked. I think sometimes modern science is all about specializing, and we forget that, our fingers on our hands are associated with our toes and our feet, and we become a specialist in a particular field. All our parts of our body are interrelated. And it makes sense because we're all made of similar component cells, and we'll talk about that, and we all eat similar types of food. But we use this very simple little graphic, which I think illustrates how things can change, sometimes without us even realizing it. And yeah, when we're born, we're kind of optimally energetic, if you like. Our bodies are reproducing cells, we're growing, developing, and I guess we would consider ourselves 100% healthy. If you look on the other axis, in the years that go along, 100 years seems to be a pretty good milestone. We can achieve it. So we go from being very energetic, and as little kids, as we then become adults and have kids ourselves, we realize how energetic they are, and how tiring they can be and how life can be quite demanding. And so we tend to sort of slip into these different zones, the tired zone, without really realizing we're there. And this can happen, quite early in our lives. And in fact, we can slip even into a sick zone, because what happens, we get these little pointers when we're in that tired zone of maybe our weight slipping up a bit, or our blood pressure's maybe a little fluctuating, our sugar levels are fluctuating. We've been given some little warning signs. Perhaps the doctor said, you're going to lose some weight, do some exercise, keep an eye on your sugar levels. It's easier said than done, let's face it. And if it were so easy, people wouldn't be slipping into the sick zone very easily. But because we're only keeping one eye on it, because it's not really life-threatening, we end up actually becoming used to it, and we slip, as I say, into that sick zone. And at that point, some of these conditions actually get given a name, so that perhaps that sugar level that was up and down, maybe now we're insulin resistant, or perhaps we're even pre-diabetic and may even have gone into diabetes. So that's what can happen without us really realizing. We kind of slide into these phases, and then we medicate them, because that's what we do in this modern world. And so you'll see that I put that line from 0 years to 100 years, and it's got a few little sort of wobbly bits towards the latter part, because we then start living a longer life, but we have that quantity, but not necessarily quality. And so, as I say, these conditions get given names. So we might, for example, have sore joints, or we feel we're not as mobile, as agile as before, and then eventually we've got inflamed joints, and then we get given arthritis as a name, and then we have to medicate that. And so that's just an idea of what tends to happen. And you'll see there, 20 years old, you think, well, that's pretty early. But the concerning thing is that some of these conditions of lifestyle, whether it be cholesterol, even blood pressure, are happening to youngsters, even younger than 20 in some cases. And the condition of diabetes, for example, we call it type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but the type 2 used to be called late onset or mature onset diabetes. Well, they've scrapped that name now, because it doesn't necessarily mean that when you're in your 50s or the latter part of your life, or your middle age, that they're going to get those conditions. People are getting them at 20, 25 years old, type 2 diabetes. So it's just showing you how our disease patterns are shifting. And these are related to our lifestyle conditions and our lifestyle choices. And that's where NeoLife comes into play and wants to make an impact. Because our mission is to make the world a healthier and happier place. Sounds all warm and fuzzy and everything, but it's actually something you can make an impact on if you actually have the right tools. And we're using nutrition as literally a weapon to enable us to be able to prevent ourselves from slipping from that energetic zone so early, put it that way, into the tired and even into the sick zone at these young years. Because actually what this is really illustrating is, look how much wasted energetic time we have done. We've slipped, and we're spending more of our years, typically, if we look around the world and we look at the statistics, we're spending a lot more time in this kind of sick zone where we're being medicated and being kept alive in a lot of ways, and losing out on all those energetic years. So a very simple little graphic, but I think one that's quite powerful and tells a story. So from a nutrition point of view, we look at our food, look at our plate of food. And it should be colorful. I'm sure some of us are eating some of these things. Maybe we enjoy them and some of them we don't like. And I want to attract attention to the decisions we make about food, because I think that's extremely important if we're going to make it a weapon for ourselves. Now, there are many different opinions about food, and I think some people are frankly quite confused, because nutrition science, like all sciences, it changes. Science is an investigative tool, so it does change. It's going to investigate new things. It's going to come up with new theories. And of course, there are lots of new theories. And that's fine. We're not going to challenge those today. We're going to stick with pretty much what nutritional science is saying at this moment. And if you look at that very basic little simplistic picture of a plate, there should be a fair degree of symmetry there, but you'll see that the dominant part, half of that plate, should really be with fresh vegetables and salads, and then fruit comes in also, not as many portions as you would the vegetables and salad, but it should take up half your plate. It should be also, from this picture, colorful. Proteins, yes, we have to have them. They're the building blocks of our whole body, but they take a part, and starchy foods, or whole grains preferably, constitute a quarter of the plate rather than what tends to happen in our modern day, where it's sometimes it's half the plate, or the protein is half the plate. And of course, there is a place there for fats and oils. So we don't leave out food groups, we simply manage them. So where do foods go? What is nutrition? Well, nutrition really in the food provides nutrients that you and I have to use. And those nutrients go into the different cells that all of us are made of, trillions of different cells. And this is a very simple little depiction of what they look like. So they all look fairly similar. They all have that sort of membrane around them, and we want it to look nice, robust, healthy cell on the right-hand side. And of course, the membrane has to be effective and be able to receive the nutrients. But cells are specialized. So an eye cell is different from a heart cell, is different from a kidney cell. They have a job of work to do for that particular organ or set of tissue, and they will receive nutrients that are applicable to their requirements. But the body knows how to do that. All we have to do is give it the nutrients and make sure that we look after those cells, that they can do their job. And it'll be interesting for those of you who aren't familiar with the NeoLife way of thinking and the products, how much we focus on this and how much products and food focus on this. Because our foods that we are looking at in terms of our products, we're looking to use nature as the blueprint. We look at the foods and say, okay, we try and keep as close to the whole food concept as possible. So our product offering is really grounded in whole foods because there's such a vast array of nutrients that our bodies need. So I make reference to these as damaging reactions. These are actually reactions that you and I have in our bodies all the time, and they're supposed to be there. We're supposed to have an inflammatory response when there's some sort of invasion or injury or something that shouldn't be there. It mounts an immune response. Inflammation comes along, sorts it out. So it should come into being and it should be resolved. Oxidation is also a natural process of our body. We're not going to go into all the details of them, but they can be damaging reactions if they're not managed. So as I say, inflammation should happen and then it should subside. Oxidation is a process normal in our body, but it should be managed. If it isn't, then they can become destructive and damaging reactions. And the things that can actually help to manage them are some of the foods that we eat. They enable us to resolve them, or in fact, some of the foods induce some of these problems. So we'll start to talk about that as we go along. But just remember, inflammation and oxidation, common processes in the body that need to work for us, not against us. Right, so this is probably something of an exaggeration, but if we look at those concentric circles that I had, or those intersecting circles, I'm just putting it in a slightly different picture here, which is perhaps a bit more graphic. And all these conditions are either induced by inflammation or they themselves cause inflammation. Something like being overweight, fat cells, in fact, give off inflammatory markers. They give the body inflammatory messages. And obesity is one of the growing concerns. In fact, it's a common denominator in virtually all these conditions. So whether it induces the inflammation or some of these conditions are caused because they produce inflammation. The bottom line is when our body's out of balance, it's in an inflammatory state, and that in turn induces more potential for disease. So you'll see from these conditions that I've shown you here that they're not contagious or infectious. We don't give them to one another. They are called non-communicable diseases or diseases of lifestyle. And these are directly influenced by our lifestyle choices, the foods we choose to eat, the exercise we choose to do or not do, whether we choose to smoke, all the things that we make choices for. So looking at it from this perspective again, these intersecting circles commonly happen together, actually. As I said, obesity is very often the common denominator in most of these conditions. But it's not uncommon for us to meet people and for people to be medicated for sugar levels that are up and down. Heart health would be things like blood pressure and cholesterol. In fact, it's so common that it actually has a name. It's called the metabolic syndrome. So these conditions are quite typical in our sort of modern Western world of living and choosing foods. And of course, this is not a judgment exercise by saying that we are responsible for all these things. The food industry has a big, big part to play in what you and I actually eat and what is available to us to eat. And it sometimes is very much the contributor to some of these conditions. So they interact one with the other, and this is the metabolic syndrome. But of course, what we, as I say, must realize that these also influence other components of the body. So our cognitive health, that's the health of our brain, the way we think, our memory, our reasoning, is also directly linked with inflammatory reactions that some of these conditions create. For example, diabetes, if our sugar levels are fluctuating and our glucose levels in our blood are high, it actually influences cells within our brain. And this is something that's more recently been discovered. In fact, I talked about type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but in fact, type 3 diabetes is a term that's been bandied around. I don't think it's an actually official term yet, but we're starting to realize that parts of the brain are actually very dependent on the insulin and glucose balance that our bodies, let's say below the brain, we are typically used to. And some cells in our brain are very, very sensitive to the levels of insulin and glucose, more so than others. And actually, interestingly, the sites of learning and memory are the ones that are directly affected. And of course, things like dementias are on the increase, Alzheimer's on the increase. So the Alzheimer sugar relationship is where they're putting the type 3 diabetes more specifically. But as I say, not an official term, but just an interesting thing to realize that this is something on the increase. I mean, all these conditions are very prevalent. And I think all of us know that, as people are living longer as well, these dementias are certainly becoming a huge concern, Alzheimer's in particular. I mean, if we just look at diabetes, I mean, that's been around a long time. We know a lot about it in terms of nutrition and the medical field. And yet in Africa, it is on the increase in a rampant way. In the next 25 years, it's considered that it's going to increase by 145%. I mean, it's completely unacceptable. When we consider how much science we have, how much knowledge we have, what medical science and knowledge we have, and we don't seem to be able to put a lid on it. So it's going to start affecting our cognitive health as well. And of course, what people probably don't realize also is the health of our gut, our digestive tract. It's a live, dynamic environment, and it has to stay healthy, it has to stay balanced, because it influences again. I mean, we have a brain-gut axis. That's actually the terminology. So what's going on in the gut affects the brain, and what's going on in the brain affects the gut. And so, I mean, many of us can just associate, if we're nervous, for example, we say, I've got butterflies in my stomach, or I'm not hungry because I'm nervous. That's related to our emotion, and it affects our gut. So that's something that most of us can relate to. But over time, if our gut is out of balance, the rest of the body will be out of balance. So just to show you that parts of our body are not independent one from the other. So again, to show you, this is not a NeoLife slide at all. In fact, this is from Harvard University, showing us that there are foods that induce inflammation, and there are foods that help us to combat inflammation. I showed you those pictures initially where we had inflammation and oxidation. They're our friends. I mean, that's how our body works. It's part of our immune system, in fact, but left to its own devices or overloaded, it becomes overextended. It becomes constantly low-grade inflammation is present in the body, and that's what induces the opportunity for disease to take hold. So these foods that the fruits, vegetables, that's on that plate of food that I showed you, and of course, the inflammatory-inducing foods are typically available to us today. So that's why I say it's the food industry that's also driving a lot of what is concerning us in terms of these dietary factors and disease factors that are linked together. Now, this is just not for us to have to delve into, but it was just, just like you're listening to a webinar, and I also do that. I participate in different webinars to learn more for myself. I'm a dietitian by profession, so it's something I need to do. And this was something I just happened to log onto the not so long ago. We were talking about renal, meaning kidneys. And again, we're not treating diseases, but what it made me realize, and this was put together, just so that you know, it's a very simplistic little thing, but I'm quite busy. But this was put together actually for Chris Hani Baragwan Hospital for the kidney unit or the renal unit to try and help people to understand what to eat and not to eat. And you'll see the red side is can't eat that, and the green side is preferable. And you'll see, though, that there's some fruit and vegetables there on the side that you can't eat. And you think, well, I thought I was supposed to eat fruit and vegetables. But what I'm pointing out here, and what made me realize, is when I talk about that plate of food, and if I base a lot of our thinking or planning around that plate of food. If we don't take note of a healthy plate of food, what tends to happen down the line is that we might well tax a system in our bodies. Now, this particular one is for end-stage renal disease, where the kidney is not working properly now. It's going to have to go to dialysis to help the kidney work, or have a transplant. So that kidney is not working for the body anymore. And so there's certain foods that you normally would have had on a healthy plate of food. Now you can't have them, even if you decide, okay, I'm going to make an effort and I'm going to eat more healthily. Now I have to eliminate some of the food. So what happens is, if we leave it and our bodies do get inflamed and we do have oxidation, and part of our bodies does deteriorate as a result of some of the lifestyle choices we've made, we get squeezed into a plate of food that's dictated for us. And so some of these foods are not allowed because, for example, they're very high maybe in potassium or phosphates, and particularly in sodium or salt. I'm going to use that. Sodium and salt. Salt is made up of parts of it is sodium, so we're going to just use it interchangeably. But there's a typical example of a food or a condiment that we actually use quite liberally, and yet our kidney now cannot manage it. So we have to now eliminate it from our diet and manage things that aren't high in salt, for example. So you'll see some of those fruit and vegetables there we're not supposed to eat because they will tax the kidney that isn't able to do its job anymore. But you look at the right-hand side, the bottom right-hand corner of that red section, and they're all the sort of processed foods and fast foods and things we buy out of the home, perhaps bring them into the home. For ease, they're available and they're convenient, and that's our lifestyle. Now, if I'm just talking about salt, in fact, what we found in South Africa in particular, the thing that's driving this kidney disease issue in this particular webinar that I was watching, and what they're finding at the public hospitals and hospitals in general, is high blood pressure. That's what's influencing kidney function. Diabetes will also do that. And different things happen in different communities, but in South Africa, that's what the issue is here. So from a dietary point of view, the recommendation to prevent blood pressure or to help to combat, keep it at bay, is to actually reduce our salt intake. And then interestingly, if we don't heed that information or that warning, then our kidney gets affected, and now we can't manage to excrete the sodium or the salt at all. So we can't have that in our diet. And so we definitely can't have these fast foods and processed and preserved foods. Interestingly, 75% of the sodium that we get from our food is actually from fast food industry or the convenience foods or prepared foods that we bring into the home, things that we haven't really had a part to play in what we're actually putting in that food. 75% of the salt that we ingest from food is from these external sources of processed foods, fast foods, etc. About 15% comes from us actually using the salt shaker, and the other 10% actually comes from what's naturally occurring in all foods that are, whatever they are. So that just shows you that we have got a degree of control as to what we put on our plate of food. If we don't make the effort to try and make our food our plate look a little bit healthier, then in fact we get squeezed into a decision where we actually have to be told what's going to be on our plate of food. So as I said, this is not a judgment. This is interesting, but it just shows you how important and what a weapon nutrition actually is. So where do we fit in here in NeoLife? What are we doing? We're not actually putting food on a plate, but what we are doing is saying we need to help to fill some dietary gaps. We need to, first of all, educate, and we need to help people to make some plans so that they can bring in some of the nutrients that perhaps they are not putting on their plate of food. And so Pro Vitality is a place that we would start. Now, right in the beginning, you saw when I showed you that slide, that we had a lot of products, and we do have a lot of products. And you might think, well, where do I start? But in actual fact, we've made it very easy, a sensible, realistic place to start, to actually help fill dietary gaps. That's our purpose, to provide antioxidants and anti-inflammatory agents that you saw from the things that I've just shown you prior to this, are prevalent in some of the foods we actually eat, and they are processes within our body, and we need to, with our food choices, help our bodies to do that job properly, but not to get out of control. Keep them neutralized, keep it balanced. Because a poor diet is definitely going to lead to chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, And a healthy diet is the cornerstone of being able to help prevent that. So let's have a look at what is in this little sachet, and we'll work through it, and I'll sort of show you how we can influence, fill a gap, help the body to achieve its balance, even if our plate of food isn't perfect. What I'm not saying, though, is that this takes the responsibility away from us to make those choices, but what it does is gives us insight into which foods we really should be choosing and how NeoLife has gone about choosing that. So this is really what is inside that little sachet. So there were 4 representations of different food groups, 4 products. And what we've literally done is gone to some of those whole foods and extracted components of those foods that are particularly helpful and healthy to have been in our plate of food, but actually to get into the body and to do the job. So if we don't have enough of those things on our plate on a daily basis, well, we're making sure that we at least contribute to the well-being of the body and tweak the plate, if you like. So I'm going to reference this little picture right along the way and talk about each individual product, but we've put it together in a little sachet. Pro Vitality would be your place to start, because I think you're going to see that makes a lot of sense. Even if you don't have a condition, you know, that we're not looking here for people who've got diseases. I was just trying to highlight how it can happen, and it happens commonly. We're wanting to help people realize what should be on their plate and prevent some of those things. Let's not go from that energetic zone into the tired zone and slip into that sick zone as easily as it's tending to happen in our modern world. So I'm going to go one step at a time with each of these products, and I'm just going to keep a little picture there to remind you of the sachet. And so we're going to talk about the grain gap. Treanin, which means 3 in 1. And what we're doing is looking at those whole grains, and whole grains will have a starchy component, they will have a fiber component, and they will have an oil component. And most people don't associate a whole grain with healthy fat. Most of us think of grains, like wheat, for example. We think of it as pasta, maybe, or bread. We don't think of it as having any oil in it. We think of it more as actually as a starchy component in our diet. But in actual fact, those grains have natural oils. And you'll see there on the left side there where I've shown that picture of a cell, those oils that are naturally occurring in the grain and should be in our diet. But the food industry, thanks to them, have removed it so that in fact we have a shelf life. Those oils are supposed to gravitate to that cell membrane, to that orange circle, to enable it to be fluid and flexible and receptive and responsive to any nutrients that come along for that particular cell, whether it be an eye cell, as I say, or a kidney cell, or whatever cell. It has particular needs for certain nutrients. And that cell knows what to do, but it's got to be in good condition to receive it. Now, interestingly, the oils from some of those grains, as I say, let's say rice. You wouldn't think that rice, when you buy that packet of rice from the supermarket, stick it in your cupboard, you expect it to be there for a couple of months until you finish that packet, and you go back and buy another one. But in actual fact, when it's growing, it has rice bran oil. Wheat, when it's growing, has wheat germ oil. And yet, as I said, the food industry has processed it out of our foods because it wouldn't have a shelf life. So we have gone into the basics, or some of the staples around the world, rice, wheat, soya, and we have taken those oils and encapsulated them in a product called Treanin. So that's the little green oval one that you see there that's in the little sachet. But we do sell them obviously all individually because we can increase the dosage if we want to, but we are giving the body a representation of it, and we're tweaking your plate of food on a daily basis. So it's the only product on the market, in fact, that has done this. It's gone and taken those oils, which is, I mean, it's not a secret that it happens, and encapsulated them and delivered that food component simply in a different delivery form. So we are filling a dietary gap from the whole food. That's important. It's one thing taking a supplement and swallowing a tablet, not really even knowing where it came from. Our passion is to actually fill this gap. So we have to go to the foods, and so we are grounded in whole food. We go there and we extract it from that actual food. We don't put the entire piece of wheat in the product. We've taken the oil, for example, or from the rice we've taken, not the starchy part, we've just taken the oil. So this is actually what we would call the world's first phytonutrient supplement. And I say that because, in fact, the word phyto, which means plant, is really only something that's been used in the last, more recent times. in terms of nutrition, phytonutrients. But in actual fact, this product, this component, was actually introduced into the marketplace of supplementation in 1958, which is 63 years ago. It's amazing that we would do this. It was pretty forward thinking, but that was when this was starting to happen. The food industry was changing the shape of our food, basically. And we were none the wiser as members of the public. We would eat what was given to us. And that's why we think we're doing okay, but sometimes it's not us, it's not even our choice. The food industry has changed things on our behalf. So now we would look back and say that was the world's first phytonutrient, plant nutrient. It's not a vitamin, not a mineral, it's a plant nutrient, created in 1958. So what is it actually giving us? As I said, it's giving us oils. And so we're familiar in NeoLife with the term lipids and sterols. Lipids are fats, basically, and it's providing those oils. Those oils are rich in what we call essential fatty acids, which means when you see the word essential in nutrition terms, it's not just because it's important. Essential means we cannot make them. So we really have to get them from our food. So now there's a problem. It's being processed out of your food, and yet something that our body needs. And fats gravitate to other fat areas in the body, so those little cell membranes are fatty substances that need to be fluid, not rigid, fluid and flexible. And liquid oils will do that. And those will come from our foods, and they are essential fatty acids. So we can't make them, and the food industry doesn't give them to us. Where are we going to get them? And then if our cells don't work properly, and those cell membranes are not fluid, they will not receive, even if you're taking and eating pretty well. Maybe you're having your fruit and vegetables, but in fact, some of those nutrients probably won't get into that cell, even though you're having them, because the cell membranes aren't in good condition, and simply because it's been processed out of our food. So a very important introduction into the marketplace. And in fact, there is no other, in spite of that knowledge, 60 odd years later, there is not another product on the market that has done just this. It has gone to the actual foods and said, let's put it back. Another component that you'll find in the germ part or the oil part of the grain are things called sterols. And there's the word phytosterol, so it's a plant sterol. And they're also naturally occurring in the cell membranes, interestingly, of the plants. Now, if you look at the word phytosterol, the sterol bit, there are other words that have that at the ending of them, and that, of course, is cholesterol. Now, you don't get cholesterol in plant foods. You only get cholesterol in animal foods, and we ingest that, and we have cholesterol in our bodies. But you don't get cholesterol in plants. Yet, they have a very similar structure. So, because they have the sterol association one with the other. So the interesting thing is when we do eat these oils that we hopefully are going to get from some of our whole grains or perhaps from a supplement form, because of their similar structure to our cholesterol, what happens when we eat them is that they compete with our cholesterol that we might also have eaten in the digestive tract, and sometimes prevent that cholesterol from being absorbed simply because their structures are similar. So they, if you like, can take up the parking spot that cholesterol might have taken. The phytosterols, naturally occurring substances from our plants and foods, will simply, muscle them out and take up that parking space, which is good for us because that means we actually can manage cholesterol more effectively just by eating the right foods. And it's now well known that rice bran oil and wheat germ oil, for example, which are both in treonine, actually reduce total cholesterol and actually also reduce the LDL component, which is usually the problematic one when you're having your blood fats tested. So isn't that amazing? Just in foods, this is a weapon. Fortunately, it's being processed out of our foods, and we have to make sure that we include that weapon. So that is why we have brought that into this little pack. It's already tweaking that plate of food for you. It's not the total amount that you need, but it's a representation. And as I say, we can take more because the product is available on its own as well. Right, so we're talking fats. Yeah, well, I just want to show you, yes. We don't just talk about it, we actually, our scientists subject the products to scrutiny in terms of the scientific community. And this, for example, is treonine done at Texas A&M University, some studies done that in fact have shown that when treonine is present in the diet, it improves overall growth and development, it improves utilization. Remember I told you about those cell membranes, we utilize nutrients more effectively. So that's just to show you But this is not just talk, it's actually been subjected to scientific scrutiny, and it's been shown that training in the diet is very important for the diet to work for you. Right, so we know that we should be having fish on our plate. It's been recommended to us as a dietary requirement because fish also provide some of the essential oils that we need. And so here I've just shown you that we've put a representation of fish in this little sachet, but in fact, this is the reason why we do it. They provide omega-3 fatty acids. They're also essential fatty acids, which means that we cannot manufacture them. We have to start getting them from the food source. And typically, though, fish intake is very, very poor worldwide, in fact. Even people living in coastal regions, they also don't eat the sort of fish that they should have, the amount that they should have. And in fact, it's recommended that we eat 2 portions of fish a week. That's what we should be doing, fatty fish. So that's sort of your salmon, your sardines, anchovies, tuna, mackerel. Not every fish has got natural fats in its flesh. We're not talking about the liver of the fish. We're not talking like cod liver oil, for example. We're talking about what's actually in the flesh of that fish. And there are certain fish that are much richer in those oils. So again, if we don't put that on our plate of food on a regular basis, well, then it's not going to come into the diet. So this is a very important product, actually, and one that we're world renowned for, because when we say a new chapter in omega-3 science, it really is, because there are a lot of products on the market that are fish oils. And I'm sure you as a consumer, if you go and look at the shelves of any of the supermarkets or pharmacies, it's overwhelming, even if you think you know what you're looking for. But in fact, typically what these products have is they have only 2 active ingredients. But in fact, we've realized that there's 8 that are nutritionally important. 8 of this omega-3 family are nutritionally important to the body. And therefore, if the body uses it and recognizes it, then we need to deliver it in that way. And so we've had to go to great lengths with this particular product to make sure that we can represent all 8 of the most nutritionally important ones. And so the little pictures that you see there on the screen are highlighting those different names. We don't have to remember all the names, but typically most products will have number 5 and number 8 that you can see on the little graphic there, because they are very well researched and they're very important. But they are created by the presence of any others there. So we have gone not only to salmon, that's been our main sort of choice, because it's very rich in these omega-3 fatty acids, but we've also gone to 3 other sardines, anchovies, and tuna to make sure that we can represent all 8. That the body, because we know, not only NeoLife, science knows that the body recognizes all 8, and that 8 are actually part of our normal biochemistry. So if we're going to ground this in whole food and fill a gap, well, we got to do the job properly, do it the way nature delivers it. And sometimes, to be fair, science doesn't fully understand all the detail of every single step, but there is a synergy for sure. If nature puts it that way, we'll allow the synergy to do its job. And so we bring in the way, when we say nature's blueprint, that's what we're really trying to achieve here. The bottom left-hand corner there, what that really is simply depicting is that we've said they're the only product with standardized amounts. Now, you might expect that every capsule, every time, has the same amount of product or ingredients, and therefore value. But that's not always the case. That's a pharmaceutical approach, a medical approach, which is what we actually have a pharmaceutical license. We are able to make medications if we choose to. And we have our own manufacturing plant in the United States where we manufacture these products and then distribute them to 50 different countries around the world. So we actually standardize the amounts of those 8 components. And as I said, that's not just something that happens. You have to make sure that in every capsule, every time, you can achieve that, which also enables you and others to do research on a product. If every capsule had a random amount simply because we threw some fish oil in there, you wouldn't be able to establish any benefits from it, as they do with medications. So it's important that it is standardized, and it's not an automatic thing in the industry. So again, also contaminants, lead, mercury are concerns, in terms of eating fish. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, particularly in pregnancy, where the women are told to eat fish and eat omega-3 fatty acids, but be careful of fish. So you want to know that something is ultra pure and has been fully tested. And this particular product has been tested for over 200 contaminants. which is actually way in excess of what is required worldwide. So again, just to show you, the product has been researched. So it's not that we are just trading on, omega-3 fatty acids are well known in the marketplace, and people are trading on well-known benefits, for example, like the heart or inflammation. But what is important is, does the product that you choose to put in your mouth actually do that? Has it actually been tested to say, yes, it does reduce inflammation, it does keep inflammation at bay, it does protect my heart. So that's why we're showing you this, because this particular product has been subject to much scrutiny and research. And just quickly to go through this to show you, first of all, it's tested to see, does the body actually recognize it? That's what's bioavailable. Is it available to the body? Secondly, what does this particular product do for your heart? Well, when you're going to have a blood test for your cholesterol, one of the measures they will test is your triglyceride levels. And if they're elevated, that's a risk for heart disease. So in just 8 weeks, by taking salmon oil plus, it reduced the triglycerides by 17%. So if you keep taking fish, good quality fish, and having a supplement along with it, because it's to get that regular amount, you're going to be able to manage your triglyceride levels, which means it manages your heart risk of disease. The improved omega-3 index is actually saying that it's detectable. That number 5 and number 8 that I talked about are actually detectable in the cell membrane, because that's where they go. Fats gravitate to fats. And it also improves the ratio of that omega-3 to omega-6. Now, there's a lot of talk in the marketplace. That's why we have omega-3 fatty acids as talked about ingredients, because we seem to have a dominance of omega-6 relative to omega-3. Omega-6 is not a bad oil. We have to have it, remember, those essential oils, and your treonine will provide some of that from those particular foods. But what was lacking were the other essential oils, the other component of the family, or the omega-3, and they need to be in harmony, in balance. And so one can detect in a cell membrane, if you do the research, to see that in fact the balance is right. And so when we bring a salmon oil omega-3 fatty acid product into the mix, it goes to the cell membrane, and what that's showing you here is that in just 8 weeks, it improved that balance of omega-3 to omega-6, brought about by the foods that we eat. It improved the balance by 43% in just 8 weeks. So we need oils from all these different families, but they need to be correctly and appropriately balanced with one another. So they have to be on our plate on a regular basis in order to do that. And then, of course, inflammation, as I said, very much an important part of our survival, but also an enemy if it isn't checked. And here again, this particular product, when taken, was able to actually balance out, again, the pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory components of the foods that we eat, and lower that potential for inflammation by 68% in just 8 weeks. So this is amazing. We know omega-3 fats can do this, but we want to know that what we swallow does it. And what we have in there is representative of how nature would deliver it to us. And in fact, just recently, a study that was done on over 400,000 men and women. So that's an enormous sample group. And it's just been published this year, actually. I think it was last year. And it showed that when people ate fish and took a supplement, because there's definitely a need for the right fats in the diet, it was associated with a lower risk of all causes of death, particular reference to heart disease-related deaths, and the lowering the risk of heart attacks and generally coronary artery disease, like diseases of the arteries and the heart. So to ensure that we actually get these omega-3 fats from fish, it's important to eat the fish, and it seems important that we need to make sure we have a supplement to make sure that we have the levels correct. And researchers out there around the world are showing people are not eating enough. In South Africa, it's no different. The research is showing that our children aren't eating it, and our parents obviously aren't eating enough, so that the children aren't aware that they should be eating it. And that's really one of the lessons we have to do. And we have to teach children, and we have to do these things in our homes, because changing habits is not easy unless we're forced to have to do them. So this, right, the 2 products that I've talked about are just really the healthy fat portions of that little sachet, but there are others that we need to talk about just to highlight what our plate of food needs to have on it. And here again, you'll see in the little sachet, we've got a fruit and vegetable component, and we want to fill that fruit and vegetable gap. Now, just to give you perspective about how much we should be eating, around the world, it was considered, let's just try and get people to have 5 portions of combination of fruit and vegetables on a daily basis. And so it was like a 5-a-day drive that we had all around the world. Governments and academic institutions and health organizations were trying to promote this around the world. But in fact, just recently, a study that was done, meta-analysis it's called, so it looks at all the studies that have been done, and there were about 100 that were taken into this assessment. And this was done by Harvard and various prestigious organizations to ascertain what was actually coming out of all these different research papers. And what it actually came up with is 5 is actually not enough. We need to get closer to 10 portions of fruit and vegetables a day with a whole lot of variety in that choice that we make, not just dump a whole lot of just spinach or cabbage or oranges or whatever that we seem to like and only eat those. There has to be variety in the diet. Now, that's quite a tall order for any of us to achieve 10 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. So here's a huge dietary gap that's very, very important. Now, that variety that I talked about comes obviously in different textures, comes from different families, different types of nutrients that are in there. And one of the typical distinctions of this variety actually is the color of the fruit and vegetables. So we're supposed to have a rainbow on our plate. Some red, some purpley, some dark blue, all these different things, some very bright greens. And so what we're talking about here, what a carotenoid actually is a collective term for the color, the red, yellow, and orange color actually in different fruits and vegetables. So this particular, we have others in our range, but for this particular little sachet that we're talking about, which is your starting point in terms of getting your plate into a good condition, we have taken the carotenoid component, which we introduced. So we went to the fruit and vegetables and extracted just the pigments out of those fruit and vegetables. And that's what carotenoids are. So again, this was a world first. We didn't invent fruit and vegetables. The concept of them being good for you, we didn't invent. But the point is people are not getting enough. And what we realized and what was discovered is that it's these pigments, in your different fruit and vegetables are actually the protectors of the fruit and vegetables, so that when we eat them, they protect us. They protect us from preservatives. They protect us from harmful agents externally as well. Smog, pollution, cigarette smoke, all the things that cause oxidation in our body that eventually cause inflammation. Our fruit and vegetables are exposed to the elements too, so they need to be protected. So when we eat them, it makes sense that they will protect us. So this was a world first. And as I said, we didn't invent the fruit and vegetable, but we were actually granted a patent for this product because we had to create the technology to go to that fruit and vegetable. And those fruit and vegetables were carrots, strawberries, peaches, tomatoes, apricots, red bell peppers, and even some spinach actually, although it's got a very rich chlorophyll green color over it, it's quite rich in carotenoids underneath that greenness. And we went and extracted the actual protector nutrients from those fruit and vegetables. So a world first yet again. And there is no other product on the market that has this broad spectrum, despite again of all the knowledge that's available. So each capsule provides the complete carotenoid value of an optimal serving of carotenoid-rich fruit and vegetables. So grounded in whole foods, representative of it. So quite an amazing product. It's represented here, just to show you quickly that we in fact have done some research on the product. In fact, amazing, the United States Department of Agriculture approached us and said, we heard about your product because we were actually invited to present it at an academic forum, very unusual for this industry. And their researchers came to our scientific advisory board and said, we would like to use your blend if we can, and we'd like to see exactly how it works because you've done so much spade work in the fruit and vegetable component. And so that's what they did. They used their own research money and their own research time, and they checked to see how the product would be, how it would behave in the body. And this is what they found, that in fact, in just 20 days, it enhanced the immune capacity of the body. And this was in healthy individuals, not people who were now down the line, as I was showing you at the end of in a disease state. These were people who had pretty much considered healthy. It could enhance their immune system by 37% in just 20 days. And there it also shows you there, these are the other research components. Because it does that, it actually increased the number and the quantity of immune cells that were actually there and the variety of immune cells in the bloodstream. It reduced oxidation, which is our damaging agent to our cholesterol, which is what actually damages cholesterol and causes it to be more destructive. it actually managed that. So we've got immunity, we've got inflammation, we've got oxidation being under control, and boost the antioxidant levels in general in the body. So remember I said inflammation, which is the representation of our immune system. And oxidation were our enemies if we didn't keep them in check. Well, foods can do that for you. And we've decided to make sure that when we deliver a supplement, a gap filler, plate tweaker of foods that we are, of supplements that we're providing for your food intake, that they work. And that's exactly what we want to achieve. And finally, in that little sachet that you'll see there, we talked about the oils that are essential. We talked about the fruit and vegetable component, and then we've put a vitamin and mineral representation there as well to make sure that all the bases are covered. So it's a multivitamin and mineral from different food sources to complement all the activities of these different nutrients and to enable the body to take whatever it's needed, whatever the cell is, it's in good condition, it's receptive, it needs nutrients, and they come along in the vitamin and mineral, just to make sure that your plate is completely full. We add a few enzymes there to make it more digestible. And so I think you'll agree that this really is an amazing little package. It's very convenient. There's 30 sachets per box. It definitely is a place to start. You can increase the concentrations of any of those, as I say, you can add to them. But if you're somebody that just wants to make sure that your plate of food is a decent representation of a healthy diet, then this would be something you would take on a daily basis. For example, I just want to reference that fish I didn't mention in terms of the 30 days. If one takes those sachets over the 30-day period, you're going to get the equivalent of about 10 portions of fish. And remember, I said the recommendation was 2 portions a week. So that's just over 2 portions a week, basically. But you're taking it on a daily basis. So it doesn't really matter what portion size you have, as long as you get the representation. So that's the sort of detail that our scientific advisory board have gone into. These products don't just happen overnight. They're 10 years in the making, but very forward thinking, as you can see. But there's nothing secretive about it. All this information about the oils from our grains and the fish we need to eat and the fruit and vegetables, the vitamins we need, is all out there. NeoLife has simply acted on that information and delivered it grounded in whole food, and I think that's fantastic. So if we just look at that, I mean, just look at the benefits just from having a good plate of food. You know, we increase our nutrient utilization, our energy, protection, immunity, inflammation, our heart, our brain, our joints, our vision. Just to look good, our skin, hair, and nails, and it assists us in that anti-aging process. So we don't have to limp down to our 100-year milestone. We can get there quite happily if we make some good food choices, and if in fact we go with the whole food, human chain nutrients with what we've done. The human food chain is important. We didn't deviate and go and find it from food or some source, in maybe it's been in nature, but that humans don't eat. It's very important. And there are products out there that are giving you ingredients that may well be similar to something in a fruit and vegetable, perhaps comes from pine bark or something. I'm not going to kill you, but you and I don't chew on pine bark typically. So we don't go to places and find our nutrients from things that are out of the human food chain. So we're not contributing to this modern problem of, food that has been changed and processed and manipulated. So you and I don't have any control. We're staying within the human food chain, and we're not including things like preservatives and colorings and flavorings. They're all part of the problem. We're trying to make sure that the problem doesn't exist, or at least it's managed. And every single ingredient is traceable from the farm to the table, which is quite amazing. We'll know exactly the seed, we'll know the seed lot, we'll make sure that we follow its process and progress. When we finally get it into our premises, it goes into quarantine to make sure we have pesticides and herbicides or anything that are undesirable. Remember, as I said, we're not trying to contribute to the problem, we're trying to manage the problem. And we have it right up to the batch number that you get on your container, so we can actually trace it right back. So from where it was grown to when it ends up on your table or in your lunchbox or your suitcase that you're traveling around with your little sachet, we know where it came from. We can find it for you. So I do believe that we are providing solutions to global trends. These are trends that are not in dispute. They are on the increase. They're interrelated, and we have to look at our plate of food to start making sure that we don't fall prey to these unnecessarily. And if we do on some occasions, because we're genetically more predisposed, we can manage them better because our body is not in a state of inflammation and oxidation. But that is all being managed by the foods that we have on our plate. And we at NeoLife really hope that we are helping you win that battle and giving you some really good nutrition as a weapon to help you make the right choices. Right, so that's what I have to share. Thank you. So I hope that you've enjoyed that and that you've learned something from it. And as I said, look at all those products. There are lots of them. But if you want to know where to start, Pro-Vitality certainly is your place. It makes a whole lot of scientific sense. It actually makes common sense. We don't have to be a specialist to understand the basics here. And then you can add other things as you need and take more of different things if you have a particular ailment or area of concern. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. And I hope you've learned something. And I hope people who have been looking into their life and wondering what all these products are all about, it's at least something to give you some insight. Right, so thank you, everyone. And we'll be chatting soon. We're doing this quite regularly, and between Drew, Brandon, and I, we'll be sharing more about NeoLife's fantastic products and business opportunity. And what an opportunity it is that we can actually go out and educate other people. I think that's great. It's not just about selling products. It's really about making a difference. And that's what excites me. So have a good day. Thank you very much.